Welcome to Rose Connections. My name is Janet Rose, and I am a social justice attorney based in Denver, Colorado. Currently, I own and operate Rose Connections, which is a private firm aimed at training, leadership coaching, and consulting, revolving around this idea of trauma informed social change through heart centered leadership. And so, what you're going to find on this page is going to be a lot of material, hopefully related to that, related to these ideas of trauma informed social change as well as heart centered leadership. And so, I wanted to explain a little bit about what I mean about each of those. Trauma informed social change is ensuring that our social policy, our public policy, our laws, the structure of our governments, and what we expect of one another in our social contracts adheres to some basic trauma informed care principles, such as safety, such as equalizing power dynamics, those types of things. And so I really try to examine social and public policy from that lens, and how can we change it, how can we improve it. And so that could be as simple as aligning a state benefit system such as aid to needy and disabled. So that was House Bill 19 1223. So that was 1223 last year. That's what that means. 19 was last year. So that was a really great example of trauma informed public policy, because what it did was it did not change the structure of the program itself. What it did change is some of the prerequisites, and a lot better aligned with the lived experience that people were having out on the streets in trying to access this benefit. So we weren't necessarily making it, we weren't making it easier to qualify or anything like that. We were making it easier to jump through the hoops that were needed, that were already there in law. So we didn't change any of the substantive how do you access this benefit. We did change some of the processes and procedures so that they were more trauma informed, so that they better aligned with the processes that were already in place and with the lived realities of what folks go through in trying to meet all of those requirements. So that was a really great example here in Colorado that happened last year. And with heart centered leadership, what I'm talking about is leading from that heart center. That's sort of what that means. But specifically, it means leading from a place of vulnerability, really accessing your own lived experience, really empathizing with someone else's lived experience in order to be able to translate that into practical policy solutions, and to be able to lead whatever organization you are with, and whatever community structure you are a part of, or whatever volunteer group you run, so that you are a more effective leader in that way. I believe very strongly that people respond well when they can connect with the leaders who are there with them, when they feel that they are both seen and heard by those leaders. And so that's at its heart what heart-centered leadership is. All of this came about because I have been doing disability policy work, as well as homelessness prevention for the last 5 years here in Denver. And I also, prior to that, was a mediator who specialized in transformative justice processes, as well as parenting coordination. And so I did a lot of community mediations. I did a lot of even neighborhood mediations, and especially a lot of divorce mediations. And so that really started bringing to light to me all the different ways in which we experience trauma. My experience over the last, I'd say, 10 years of my career have focused very specifically on trauma, on consent, on conflict resolution, and all of those kind of ugly things that lay in wait, that can sabotage our relationships, that can sabotage our leadership, that can sabotage our best intentions, even in government and law. And so I'm here to help challenge and transform those ideas. So you're going to see about 3 different categories primarily of what I do here. So the first is radical reflections. I do take a spiritual bent to things, as you can tell from the decor. I have a thing. But that thing is not necessary in order to be able to access and understand what I'm talking about. I will use that imagery to connect to people and to connect it to my own story because I teach best from my own authenticity. And the goal in radical reflections, or what I call silver mountains, is to climb your own mountain, is to become familiar with the landscape that you carry with you, with all the resources that you carry with you, as well as the stories that you've hidden underneath. And to climb your own mountain, get to the precipice, see things from a different perspective. And that raises the bar for you as a leader and for you as an individual in whatever relationships you're in. And because I believe so strongly that we cannot transform the world until we transform ourselves, that's the first step of this building block. The second block is relationship reboot, because I am also convinced that we will not be able to see significant change in our public policy until we also transform how we prioritize one another and our duty to one another and our rights within our own relationships with each other. And so to demonstrate that mastery of knowing your stuff, like being familiar with your own trauma, with your own story, with being a master of climbing that mountain and seeing things from a new perspective, you can then apply that in what I call the rose gold flames, because in that heart-centered leadership model, we then also need to transform our relationships with one another. And so that could be our intimate partnerships, that could be our family, that could be our children, that could be our coworkers and neighborhoods, it could be anybody. It is that practice mode of that march toward mastery. And so you'll see some when I challenge relationships and when I challenge our stories within relationships, you'll see me put it under that relationship reboot model. And then lastly, you'll see me refer to radiant resilience. I have a thing for R's. I have a thing for alliteration. Sue me. Please don't sue me. But with radiant resilience, that for me is, I call that the diamond crown. That is that point where you have been through this initiation. You have demonstrated how you can change and transform your relationships. And you are now ready to take on this leadership mantle where you have to demonstrate that resilience to a larger audience, where you have to gain that trust on a larger scale, and where you can now apply that lived experience without the trauma of it holding you down, so that you can leverage that into really effective policy. So you'll see me refer to all three of these. Likewise, I also do some guest appearances on a few other shows, a few other channels. And so Buddhist Biohacker, I do a monthly Mary's Messages. So you can find me there as well, the first Monday of the month. I also have my own blog, Sharp Sweet Bella, so it's a very personal take. It does tend to gear more toward the relationship reboot end of things. And then likely you will also find me on Twitter or Instagram as Sharp Sweet Bella, and I tend to get very politically involved, very politically opinionated. But I also welcome healthy conversation that really aims at how can we improve the world for all of us so that no one gets left behind. That is really my goal here. So everything I do tries to be trauma informed. It tries to be inclusionary. It tries to be intersectional. But there are going to be times that I fail. So I also invite you to share with me any ideas or suggestions that you might have to help me make this more accessible. Specifically, I am looking into closed captioning. I'm new to this, so please bear with me while I learn along the way. Lastly, you can also support my work if you are not going to be a direct client of any of my coaching, and you just want to partake in the freebies. You can also get some more freebies, or I shouldn't say freebies, but you can get some more exclusive content. by supporting me on Patreon. So you can go to Rose Connections and search for Rose Connections on Patreon, and it'll be in the notes here. But you can also support me that way as well. That's going to be a little bit more of the spiritual bent of things. So I'm going to be sharing messages. I'm going to be having, depending on the level of support, you might get access to the members only parts of my blog and just the stuff I don't have out publicly anymore. So you can get access to all of those archives. You can access early content, and you can access a community to have these conversations with each other, to have this conversation with me. And likewise, I will be hosting both monthly and bi-weekly sort of spirit calls so that we can kind of connect the dots to everything that we're seeing in the world in real time, and connect that back to these spiritual principles that I talk about. And yes, the spirituality is a part of what I do. It's just a part of who I am, but it is not at all a prerequisite. You don't have to believe the things that I believe, because I do try to make this much more about just humanity. So that's who I am in a nutshell. That's what you can expect to see here. Oh, and you can also find my old 2012 bar exam videos and maybe compare and contrast to where I am now to where I was then. Right then, I was going through a very difficult time in my life. And that's actually how Buddhist biohacker Lisa Gunshore got involved with my life as well, was helping me through some of those really difficult times that you saw there at the end of those bar exam videos. So I am very welcoming toward compassionate feedback, and I hope to be learning with you soon. Take care.